Welcome to the Cash Flow Project Podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Matt Callihan with Tri-City Equity Group. Today we have Josh Plave on the show. But with me, as usual, is my co-host, Steve Fierros. Hey, Steve.
Hey, what's going on, Matt? Hey, today we have an awesome interview with Josh Plave from Walton, Maine. He shared with us a bunch of gems in terms of self-directed IRA. This is his specialty, but he's also a syndicator. So he definitely has the ins and outs in terms of, hey, how can you get your maybe retirement account money moving into something that's more passive and more stable, than the stock market can be, avoid the volatility there, move some funds over to your self-directed IRA. And that could be a great source of funds that you can move into that you're like, hey, I don't know where I'm going to come up with a down payment to be involved in a syndication or, some other type of investment. But you may have some money sitting around from a past retirement account. So make sure you stay tuned to the show. He's going to share with us a bunch of gems and great words of wisdom. So stay tuned, guys.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Project. I'm your host, Matt Callihan, Tri-City Equity Group. Today, we're going to have an awesome guest on the show talking about self-directed IRAs and different things and how he's built a huge portfolio. So with us today is Josh Plave. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
And then, as always, my co-host, Steve Fierros.
What's going on? Aloha, guys.
Hey, Steve. So Josh is the founder of Walton, Maine. He's a multifamily syndicator who specializes in streamlining the process of using your retirement funds to invest in real estate. Through his company, Walton, Maine, Josh provides the tips and tricks needed to invest quickly, safely, and cheaply with an existing retirement account. And he's built a portfolio of over 700 units across 3 different markets. Josh, good morning.
Hey, guys. How are you?
Good, doing well. So for people who might not be familiar with you and kind of your company, what are you working on? What exactly do you do? And what do you have going on right now?
Kind of to give you, a background on how I, as a 30-year-old, ended up being kind of a retirement account guy. I started at a young age. At 16 years old, I opened up my first Roth IRA. I always had an eye on wanting to kind of look towards the future. And my family definitely kind of pushed me in that direction. So roll it forward about 10 years. Unfortunately, my grandfather and my mother both passed away. And what that did was it left me with a bunch of inherited IRAs, myself and my sisters. At a young age. And I had to figure out kind of how we were going to handle all of these accounts. It wasn't enough that I could just kick back and relax for the rest of my life, but I needed to figure out kind of how to preserve their legacy and move forward, establish something for the next generation, essentially. And so I really dug down and figured out kind of all the processes and how you can deploy retirement funds across not just stocks and bonds, as most people tend to do, but into alternative asset classes as well. And I happen to focus on multifamily real estate. And I've taken what I think is a very confusing subject matter that people keep purposefully confusing and kind of try to distill it down into something easy to learn, some easy to follow concepts that help other investors figure out the right direction for themselves.
So it sounds like from an early age, you've had some kind of financial literacy drilled into you. How did you decide that once you figured out the concept of self-directing these IRAs, that multifamily real estate was going to be the vehicle that you use to kind of hit some of those goals?
Yeah, so I started looking into self-directed IRAs mostly because I had always had an eye on real estate. From a young age, everybody, most people, their parents and their family drills into you, go to, get good grades, go to a good school, get a job and climb the corporate ladder. And I'd always kind of wanted to jump over to real estate at some point. This kind of gave me the opportunity since I needed to figure out where to take the funds. And, I was a little afraid of the stock market and where it was headed. I wanted to find something different to go down. So what I did was I essentially created like a self-taught curriculum. For about, I'd say 10 months, I hopped onto Bigger Pockets. I listened to every podcast I could, watched all the webinars, went to every meetup, did the whole intro to real estate thing. And the overarching theme that I saw across all of these things was everybody kept on saying, you start small, you start with a single family Then you maybe move into a duplex and a quad and then an 8. And you do the stack, as BiggerPockets says, and you go from there. And they would always say, someday I'd really like to syndicate. Even like the big names on different podcasts would say, yeah, I would really like to syndicate someday. I think that's where a lot of, the real cash flow comes from. And so I started looking into multifamily. I saw a few projects or presentations coming from it. And I come from an analytical background. And so what I did was I dug into it from an analytical standpoint to see if I could kind of run the numbers, if I could generate a pro forma, understand how to, assess a deal properly. Once I figured out that I, had an eye for it, I figured it was the right method. I jumped straight into multifamily, and it's been a nice road ever since.
That's crazy. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people think that's the certain route you have to take. Single family home, get the skills, maybe duplex, fourplex, and you just jumped into it. How big was the first deal that you did?
It was a portfolio. So it was 173 units. I believe one was 90, one was about 80. And yeah, they're the two properties. They're in Lubbock, Texas. They were kind of just down the street from each other. And so they were operated separately to begin with. And when we bought them together, we were able to kind of put them together, have nice economies of scale based on, shared expenses and stuff like that. So it's been nice.
You heard it here, kids. You don't have to. You can dive straight into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
Kudos to you. That's awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I like to toot my own horn about my first one being like 52 units, but I'll just go ahead and sit back down.
No, it takes a team. I didn't source a deal. I wasn't the one who found it. But there were plenty of people involved, a couple GPs, and a great team of lending brokers and everybody who all plays their part. So that's sort of what I love about large scale multifamily, is because I won't say it's hard to go wrong, but there's a lot of eyes, a lot of professionally trained eyes on one deal. And so there's, if someone is underwriting incorrectly or glossing over a fact or figure, it's likely to get caught by somebody else in the group.
No, that's true. So true. That's a good point. Do you still own that property?
Yeah. We actually just closed on it a year and a half ago.
So in a year and a half, you've gone from 0 to over 700 units.
Don't be fooled by the numbers. People run around the industry and tout their numbers. I've just done a handful of deals, and it just happens to have larger scale because of that. It's no different than somebody putting together 3 or 4 50, 60 unit deals. It just has some more doors behind it.
Yeah, that's true. So I kind of want to go back to this. So you had some inheritance, right? So part of your reason why for getting into real estate was that preservation of capital. Did you have any other reasons why?
To start with, it was pretty much just preservation of capital. I was pretty young and had, previously I'd had experience in stocks, and I shared a pretty profile. I was cool with risk because I'm young, and so I know that there's time if things go downhill. I'm always okay with that. So on the personal side, establishing my multifamily business, I've been okay jumping into multifamily because I know if things don't work out and pan out immediately, I'll have time to kind of pivot, find the next, thing that suits me. But it has been panning out, and it was a nice vehicle to kind of both move myself in a riskier direction, something that I didn't necessarily have a strong background in just yet, and then now something that's also at the same time going to preserve, our family's wealth or whatever you call it.
Yeah, I gotcha. That's cool.
I think that's
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no, I was going to say, like Josh, you mentioned earlier about involving the team. I think actually that's a great thing about going straight into multifamily versus, let's say, single family. Not saying you don't need a team necessarily for single family, but, there's a lot of people that just, hey, you know what, I want to rent out my prior house. And if that's the way you start, hey, wonderful, do that. But you going straight into the multifamily, you have to, you're not taking that down by yourself. There's just, I don't know if it's physically possible, right? Like just in terms of management, I mean, I guess you could, but I don't, definitely not to the size of that,
no.
your initial purchase. I think that's a big struggle. I mean, that's been a struggle for me, is like, hey, a lot of people have trouble letting go of the reins, so to speak, right? Because it's like, well, you think, hey, you know what, if I've got to depend on a team, that means it's no longer under my control. And, now I've got to depend on other people, versus realizing, hey, no, this can help to fast track the process. Just like you said, well, hey, I've got more eyes. You don't know what you don't know, right? So if you've got other experienced eyes on the team, on the group that can help to kind of see those things where maybe you've got some blind spots, I mean, that's huge, right? And it's almost less risky, honestly, to do something like that versus, hey, I'm just going to be a one-man show. I'm going to do it solo. I'm just going to take all the bumps and bruises as we go. I think that's far riskier than, doing what you did and jumping in with a team. So just highlighting the benefit of tapping into those additional resources. And I'm sure, you're a pretty young guy. I'm sure most of the other people on your team necessarily weren't as young as you. I mean, well, maybe, I don't know.
It's a mix. Yeah, it ranges. But you're absolutely right. Dead on. I mean, if you want to run fast, go alone. If you want to run far, run as a team. So you can't pull down a large scale deal without people who have net worth to sign on the loan. I have a mentor who guides me through the process, and teams that have net worth experience on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans. And if you don't have that experience, you quite literally cannot actually close on these deals. So you need somebody on your team who has prior experience as well as other personality traits and different skills that you don't have.
Yeah, I like that metaphor about going together, right? And then, man, I do this every morning. I swear I do this every morning. My brain just stops working. Steve, what was I going to say? You've got my other half of the brain.
I wanted to comment again about Josh's shirt, man. I love that. I miss my flannel. No, I'm just playing. I think it's great. That's actually a really good quote. I'm gonna save that quote. Yeah, I've heard it before, but I think I like it better you saying it, Josh.
I was watching Succession earlier this morning. I actually heard it on the TV show, and I was like, "This applies."
You're like, I'm putting that in my pocket.
Scarcity mindset. That's what I was going to say is, so many people, like Steve said, want to be in control and do the whole deal. And I've talked to so many people, and I'm a big fan of Shark Tank, free plug to Shark Tank, but they always ask these people, like, would you rather have 100% of nothing or, 50% or 20% or whatever of like a multi-million-dollar company? And I don't think people think that way, but it sounds like you do.
Yeah, that's something that my mentor really stresses is we get in, someone will find a deal within our group and they'll go out, they'll have to search for hundreds of deals just to find one that actually works. And when they actually land on something, they know they can't pull it down themselves. So they have to bring in a large team. And the question is, do you want to try to save 50, 75% of it just to get, that much of the general partnership because you searched for so long? Or do you want to transfer over, make sure that it succeeds, that it closes, that you fund it, and just take 5, 10, 15% of the entire deal and just move on to the next one because it took you a while to find it, but you want to make sure that it closes.
Yeah. And I think too, the other side of that is when you have those skills, like you said, like a good eye for underwriting, you take down one big deal and it's a huge capital event and now you're no longer liquid. Well, you want to keep doing deals. At least we want to keep doing deals. So by bringing in partners, it's essentially I can do as many deals as I can find and just keep closing them. So it might be 5-10% here. But if I do 10 of those, it's the same as that one deal I took down, but I'm building a huge portfolio, builds my resume, gets those numbers that you said people are always talking about in the industry, which, does help you close more deals. And you can advertise a 700 unit portfolio. Lenders know you're serious. Brokers know you're serious. Just velocity of capital.
I'm huge on velocity of capital. As I started up my multifamily operation, I knew it was going to take some time to get involved in my first deal. So what I actually did was I invested in private money loans to keep my velocity of capital up because I could get into one of those a lot sooner. And so we had those turning off interest rates while we were, searching for deals.
Yeah, I started with private money lending as well while I looked for a deal because I was like, sitting in an account, I can send it out to someone else that can use it for their deal, while I keep looking. But I want to pivot here. So we have a lot of our followers that have gotten some of the guidance you have. Maybe they went to college, they're doing well in their career, they're stocking money away into their IRA, and now multifamily is getting more mainstream. People are hearing about it, and they want to invest. Can you talk about, one, what is a self-directed IRA, and two, kind of how they can take those funds that they've been saving, thinking are just in this account untouchable, and use them to invest in multifamily?
Yeah. So if anyone ever tells you that a self-directed IRA is confusing, or if you feel like it's confusing, it really isn't. Essentially, what a self-directed IRA is one that just invests in something that isn't stocks and bonds. A lot of people don't know that you can move it outside of equities, and you can move it into anything you really want. There are 3 limitations. You can't invest in collectibles like art, jewelry, or cars. You can't buy life insurance with it, and you cannot invest in shares in an S corporation. Outside of that, you can, if you think it's a good investment, you can actually move an IRA or a 401k into it. I've even heard of people purchasing racehorses. So there's quite a range of what you can actually do with your money. I personally choose multifamily as a result. What essentially happens is, your money is typically held at, let's say, TIAA, Vanguard, Schwab, any of those kind of custodians. So those are called custodians. Those custodians just happen to focus their brokerage house on equities, on the stock market and the bond market. So they won't actually let you move into real estate. What you need to do is find a custodian that actually specializes in that. I personally love to opt for checkbook control accounts. It's a lot more inexpensive. It lets you operate. I mean, I like to joke that you can find a deal at breakfast and fund it by lunch. If you hold the money at a custodian, a lot of the people who educate in this space are custodians. And if you have to apply to a custodian for every transaction, it can tend to take weeks to actually get the paperwork all cleared and taken care of. What a checkbook account actually does, and is, in my opinion, the best way to deploy your funds. What you have is a custodial account, as you typically would, but then you also have an LLC that's established for that custodial account. And so what happens is the custodial account invests 100% of the funds into that LLC. They buy 100% of the shares. You're then the manager of that LLC. So you have total control over that actual LLC, and you can open up a checking account for that corporation and just move from there and just have, checks and wires that can fund deals from there.
That's really interesting, actually. I've never even heard of a checkbook control. Is that safe? Is that something that...
Yeah, so it's purported and advertised as the unsafe freewheeling version. If you open it with the right service providers, the really nice thing is they'll actually consult the LLC. So somebody who establishes a custodial account, or the custodian themselves, they are fiduciaries. So they're not fiduciaries. They're not actually... you can't rely on them to not have high costs. They can't rely on them for actual financial advice. They're not required to give you financial advice. If you open up a checkbook control IRA with the right service provider, they can actually advise your LLC. So if you have any questions about any kind of transaction you're getting involved in, if you're getting involved with, there are things called prohibited or disqualified persons, and we'll talk about that a bit later. But if you're concerned about who you're investing alongside with, and if it's allowable by the IRS, you can consult them and you can get a feel for if what you're doing is all right. So perfectly safe, and it keeps it really low cost. It's the annual costs for it range between $135 and $180. So it's really cheap to continue. It's not based off of each individual transaction. You don't pay extra. You just pay like a wire fee, $25 or $35. And so it keeps overhead really cheap. All of your returns come back to you in your account, and they don't go to, as your account grows and grows, you don't pay administrative costs for a larger and larger account.
Yeah, it's awesome. And so for our listeners, it's like, I don't know if you guys are catching that, realizing that it's like, okay, like if you've always wanted to invest in multifamily or invest in real estate, and you're just thinking, man, I just have this money sitting over here. I can't touch it. I can't do anything with it. Surely I can't use that for a deal because just like that, well, that's not safe. That's freewheeling. And I'm sure there's a lot of financial advisors and a lot of people who are not really in the investing space or, selling anything outside of life insurance. Nothing against, financial advisors. I think most people are just unaware of, all the mechanics of how that can possibly work. You potentially have, funds for a deal right there. So that it's huge. It gives you so much more flexibility and control, what Josh is talking about.
Yeah, people tend to not realize that they have that power and that potential. If you've had any kind of career, there's a good chance that you have, you've established 401ks or IRAs. The one thing I should mention, by the way, is that you need your account that you're thinking of right now. It needs to be what I call in your control. If it's with a current employer, if it's the 401k at the current employer, it needs to allow for what's called an in-service rollover, so that it can be rolled over to an account that you control, as opposed to your company's administrator. And most plans don't really allow for that unless you're a lot older. So if you have an account from a previous employer, that's great. But typically you need to leave your employer if your account that you're, if you have that, the one they have in mind, if it's held by your current employer.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out. Now I have a question. Could more than one person put their IRAs into an LLC for the checkbook control?
So no, they are all kind of siloed by themselves. Yeah. But the really nice thing is that so let's jump into disqualified persons. This kind of leads right into that. And so what a disqualified person is someone that your IRA or 401k cannot actually invest with. So you're actually the very first disqualified person. You can't buy let's say a house and rent from it. Even if you're renting for free, you can't buy a vacation house and stay in it for free, because that means that you're gaining a direct benefit from your retirement account. And on the flip side, your retirement account can't gain a direct benefit from you. So you can't buy like a property that needs to be flipped and then go and work on it yourself. You can oversee it and hire contractors to take care of it for you, but you can't actually be the one in charge of the project. Working on the project yourself. And so you're the first disqualified person. Disqualified people include linear ascendants and descendants. And what I mean by that is parents and grandparents going up, and then descendants, it's children and grandchildren. And at any level, that includes spouses, including your own spouse. So that kind of limits a lot of the people that are most obvious to invest with. A lot of us might want to invest with our parents or our children. But the nice thing is, because your IRA, I like to think of your IRA and yourself as different people, because you can't gain a direct benefit from it. Because they're different people, your disqualified persons, their retirement accounts are also different people. They're not disqualified people. So your spouse, their IRA can invest with your IRA. So you can actually mix those accounts. So going back to your question, each LLC has to have their own individual IRA associated with it. You can't mix multiple IRAs. But what my family's done is we've taken all of these. We have 6 or 7 different checkbook IRA LLCs, and then we mix them into one holding company. And that way they can all successfully invest together. For multifamily, usually typical minimums are between 50 and 75,000. And so we can get involved in a deal on a lower level per person. We can each put in 25,000 and meet a 75,000 minimum. And that just allows us to really kind of stretch the power of our collective dollars in one holding pool.
Okay. So you can't directly just all invest to an LLC, but there is a way kind of around where you can benefit from multiple self-directed IRAs.
Yeah, they can all go together.
Okay. So I think one of the big draws for people investing in multifamily is the tax benefits and kind of what we can do with cost segregation. Geez, it's not even early. It's 8:30. Cost segregation. So what taxes apply to a self-directed IRA? Is there any, benefits or drawbacks from using a self-directed IRA to invest in multifamily?
Yeah. So when it comes to multifamily, there are actually taxes involved in an IRA. Believe it or not. So we should mention there's 2 different kind of accounts. There's the IRA that most of us will invest in with. There's also a solo 401k if you have self-employment income, and you can roll over an IRA into a solo 401k. The solo 401k is completely exempt from the taxes I'm about to talk about. So that's a nice way to go about it. So if you have any self-employment income, it's a great option for you. If you don't, then you're going to be opening up a self-directed IRA. And when a self-directed IRA is involved in a leveraged asset like multifamily, there are taxes involved. So when the IRA was created, they wanted to incentivize you to use tax-deferred dollars. It's your tax-deferred dollars, and so they want you to invest that for your future self. When you're bringing in loans, like in a multifamily property, we buy a $10 million property. It's going to have 7.5 of it, probably 8 of it brought by a bank. And so that money is non-tax deferred. That's outside money. And so when that outside money comes in, it's influencing and helping your IRA. And so the IRS is okay with this. They just say you need to pay taxes on the portion of money that is brought in by the bank. So if, let's say, 75% of the deal is leverage and 25% was the equity down payment, then for that first year, you're going to pay taxes on 75% of the income that is generated. Now, the nice thing is, because you have to pay taxes on the 75%, because 75% of it is income from somebody else's dollars, you can actually use 75% of depreciation, of operating expenses, and any other expenses as well to help offset things. And so what I did was, there's a lot of confusion around this. The two concepts involved here are UDFI. So the first one is unrelated debt financed income. And that's what I just talked about. It's the financing, it's the income that comes from financing that's outside of your IRA. And then that generates a tax. The tax is known as UBIT, or unrelated business income tax. And so when you pay the UBIT, it typically comes just on capital gains. There is a lot of confusion around it. A lot of people say you should never really take your IRA and invest in a leveraged property because it brings in these taxes. And I mean, what's the point of an IRA if it's not to have tax deferred, completely tax free gains? But what I did was, I actually built the real estate industry's first UBIT calculator, because I was kind of tired of hearing people throw out these vague, like statements. I say, oh, it's the worst thing ever. It's not. I ran a bunch of properties through the calculator, and I found that essentially what happens is those losses in the first few years can actually help offset enough of the gains, or on the cash flow, that it offsets any kind of UBIT that you have to pay in the first 3 to 4 years for most deals. So for the first 3 to 4 years, you get your cash flow, you don't have to pay taxes, and that's all fine. What typically happens is you pay on the capital gains, as I mentioned, and it's a larger amount. It can be $20,000 to $30,000, but when you annualize it out over the life of a deal, and most deals are about 5 years, if a multifamily property generates between, let's say, 18 and 20% annually, including sale proceeds due to appreciation, then we're actually looking at approximately a 3 to 4% reduction due to UBIT per year. And so you're looking at something between 15, 16, 17% in the end. So basically, it allows you to evaluate, is that a proper investment for you? Is that something that's going to generate the right returns you're looking for, or do you want to look somewhere else? But I supply it to all my investors whenever we offer a deal, so I can offer expected earnings, and then I can offer expected taxes based off of those earnings. And so it's just, you have to know what you're getting involved in. There are taxes involved, but honestly, you can still generate pretty solid returns even if you have to pay the UBIT.
It's great. That helps to give investors a more complete picture, right? Because it's, instead of it just being, okay, hey, great, like I'm going to be earning X amount. It's like, well, yeah, but that can also it's also going to have tax implications, and that's a quick and easy way, right? Like, it sounds like it, right? To be able to, I can plug in some numbers to the calculator. I can at least get a little better view or vantage point on, hey, what the situation is going to be on the backside.
Yeah, that's a small opportunity cost of, yes, I'm going to pay a couple percent in taxes, but to make the 17 to 20% a year, like you said, it's a little positive tax arbitrage. So specifically, with using these self-directed IRAs, why is multifamily a good fit for that versus something like, say, racehorses?
Well, I mean, if you have an expertise in racehorses, by all means, go for it. But there's a large community, and you can learn really easily what being a passive investor is. And you can get involved with cash as well. And so you can kind of spread out your portfolio across different regions. It's really nice because multifamily, one of the things I love about multifamily, and it applies no matter what funds you fund it with, is you're automatically an out-of-state investor. I live in Denver, and I don't know really anybody that's actually buying properties in Denver. So our portfolio ranges across the South, Southeast, and it automatically generates a nice diversification across your portfolio. That's why I love it. Even if you're involved in the same broad asset class across much of your portfolio, if you're investing in not just coastal towns, but inland towns, so you're not affected by different storms or anything. If you're investing in A class, B class, C class, you can kind of range and pick and choose what the right investment is based on the time, on the landscape, the economy at the moment, and go from there. And so even if you're just investing in multifamily, there is still quite a diversification that's involved within the class.
Talking about, go ahead. I was going to ask Josh if he's seen, obviously when we're recording this, there's a lot of kind of volatility going on, a lot of uncertainty. Are you seeing any increased activity or maybe reluctance because of, now obviously the stock market's done great the last stretch, but for specific sectors, have you seen people reluctant? Have you seen people wanting to pull money out, especially if they were heavily invested in some of the the economic, into their sectors that have gotten hit hard, right? Because there's obviously, travel and, retail services and all that kind of stuff have been hit pretty hard. Have you seen people, what kind of movement have you seen both ways?
Yeah, so I'll take a look at this from kind of like investor standpoint and as well as the deal flow standpoint. So from an investor standpoint, I have had just as many investors coming to me now as before. It's people are they're reluctant and scared of what's going on with the market, because at this point, a lot of the market is weighed heavily. I think 15% is those FANG stocks, Facebook, Amazon, Netflix, Google. So you're getting a lot of weight from one specific area, and you're getting the stock market to be essentially detached from the economic picture. And so a lot of investors they're happy at what's happened with their accounts for the last 10 years. And they realize that maybe it's the right time to move into a stabilized asset class that can really withhold a lot of the fluctuations that come from some economic turmoil like we might be facing. And then from a deal flow standpoint, a lot of properties, a lot of owners didn't really want to sell during coronavirus that we were seeing. So deal flow really dried up. Our group last year did a 21 to 22 deals. And I think we've only done 3 or 4 this year. So it's really slowed. We're starting to see deal flow pick back up. It's just back at pre-coronavirus prices.
Oh, that's a huge change. I mean, that's awesome that you guys did that much volume last year, but that's a significant drop. And then I'm sure that's, there's no drop necessarily on you guys in terms of, underwriting and still, trying to source deals. But, obviously people are reluctant to make transitions and moves with all the uncertainty going on right now.
Yeah, they don't want to seem like they're a desperate seller. So they just held on to the property for a few extra months.
And then they become desperate, and then they finds an opportunity for
yeah. Josh, what 3 markets are you in?
Lubbock, Texas, Memphis, Tennessee, and Boston, Massachusetts.
Any specific reason for those? I was just going to say, any specific reasons for those 3 markets, or was it just, hey, we've got teams there, or hey, we saw some deal flow there, or?
It's essentially teams. The people who source the deal in Lubbock, they live in Texas. So one of them actually went to school in Lubbock, so she knew the market pretty well. And so we were able to get kind of local information based on that. In Memphis, we have a team of property manager who is incredibly successful. They are able to turn they can take a turd and polish it into a nice, shiny diamond. They have a really strong grab on everything. And from there in Boston, I went to school in Boston, so I went to college there. So I just know the local market pretty well.
Nice.
Which school in Lubbock and which school in Boston?
Texas Tech in Lubbock and Northeastern University is where I went to school.
My dad went to school in Lubbock, and then I have a friend that went to school at Boston.
Okay.
Boston. I've never been there myself. I'm familiar with the Callihan Bridge or Callihan Tunnel. Callihan Tunnel.
Bridge, I think. No, tunnel. Yeah. You're right. It's tunnel. Yeah.
He's like, yeah, that was my family.
Someone say they spell it incorrectly, but I'm sure there's probably a bridge over it. Okay. I just have a quick question because it's been on my brain this whole time. And I'm wanting to know. At 16, you opened a Roth IRA. Where did that come from?
Yeah. So the people that I mentioned that actually passed away, my mom and grandfather, they were both CPAs. And so I had a long kind of history of people that were really saying like, here's how you balance checkbook. Here's how you evaluate stocks. They kind of planted those seeds in me. They were trying to inception me when I was like 16. Yeah. And I had just gotten one of my first, camp counselor jobs. So I had $1,000 in my account. And I think they had just told me about a Roth account. And I was like, okay, well, I already paid taxes on it. So if I just put it into an account and I start investing from here, I can literally gain 100% free for the rest of my life. That's awesome. So that's what I did. I, against the judgment of my broker at the time, I was really into airplanes, and I still am. But I really wanted to invest in air defense and airlines. And so it was it was 5 years after 9/11. And he said the whole sector is.
We're still 16 then.
What was that?
They said we're still 16 years old right now at this point in the story.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So you're 16 and your broker, against his advice.
Yes. He said, don't invest in airlines. They're in the trash. And so I invested in airlines because that's what I knew. I strongly advise that you invest in what you know. Get to know whatever you're investing in. I knew that at the time. I knew exactly where they were headed. I knew that they were struggling, and I knew they had potential in the future. And from that point until I pulled it about 2 years ago, it actually beat the S&P 500 for the next 15 years. Just because of, I happened to buy at the bottom. I didn't know I was, but I did. And yeah, it was a lucky guess. I turned $1,000 into like 2.5, 3, whatever it was. But
great timing on the exit too, right? Like,
point actually.
Yeah, that's wild. Okay, I'm curious to know with all your checkbook accounts, are they all in multifamily? Is that the only thing you invest in with them, or how do you diversify those? What are some options for people out there that self-direct an IRA? I know we've talked about what you can, but what do you personally use?
Yeah, personally, I've done multifamily and private money lending. I'd say we started off about 75%, 80% in private money lending, and it's as we've moved into multifamily, we've shifted. So it's only about 15, 20% in private right now. But you can invest in quite a bit of other stuff. We do syndications in multifamily, and there's syndications in self-storage and industrial and things like that. And if you happen to know those sectors, those are great places to be as well. And there's land. You can invest in single family homes. So there's quite a bit out there. You can do crypto. You can do anything that you can really think of, honestly.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that really opens up a lot of opportunities. All right, so go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just going to ask him. I'm like, obviously you're a syndicator. You're obviously involved in the multifamily space, but your company and providing advice on the self-directed. Do you get the occasional kind of like racehorse thing or crypto or something else beyond like multifamily?
No, so I've definitely dialed in my messaging into just passive investing. So there's a lot of advice. There are the people I work with, the service providers I end up driving investors to open up an account with. Those folks are the ones who kind of understand the broad swath of everything you can invest in. They're the ones who can advise you on, if I want to invest in a business, how do I go about that? There are a few taxes involved with that as well. And so there's a whole multitude of things that you can do, and there are experts out there to help you with that. What I've tried to do is make the passive investing experience streamlined for retirement accounts. And so I love to focus on just one thing at a time and be good at it.
Awesome.
So Josh, what we like to do kind of as we wrap up here is what we call our fire round, where I'm just going to ask you some questions that really don't have a lot to do with much.
Sure.
And just kind of off the top of your head, answer. All right.
So
what's the best book that you recommend other than Rich Dad, Poor Dad?
Well, I'll go for multifamily side of things. I love Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl.
That's my recommendation to everybody's too. It's like
the Rich Dad, Poor Dad of multifamily. I feel a little cheap going with that, but
Yeah.
Good.
All right, what's your superpower?
Okay, my superpower, I would go with, I'm going to go something kind of non-serious. I'm really, really good at paperwork. I found when I was opening up all of these self-directed IRAs, there's not for one every specific IRA checkbook account that you need to open up. There's not a ton of paperwork. There's maybe 4 to 5 documents, but when you are opening up 6 or 7 at a time, there's 50, 60 documents going around, and you got to keep track of different versions. Turns out I'm really good at keeping track of documentation.
That's awesome. That is a valued skill set, like right there.
It's weird, but it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You say you live up in Denver. What are some of your hobbies?
Skiing. I love skiing. I moved here to ski. It's one of my whys. I'll give you a quick story. Last year I was skiing, and it was the huge storm of the entire season. And so it was on a Thursday that the storm came in, and I went in on Thursday and just got into Vail right before they closed the passes to get into Vail. And so I got there, and it was like 4 feet of snow. Honestly, at that point, because of my skis, they were a little too narrow. It was too much snow. I even have wide skis. I live in Colorado. And so I was sinking, but it was honestly a great time. It was one of the best days I've ever had skiing. But because the highway was closed, no one could really get in. And that's honestly why it was so great, because there was fresh water everywhere. So move forward a day, they were able to clear the highway and open it back up, because the highway opened up and everyone saw the pictures from people who were actually able to ski. The entire Front Range, the entire Denver area moved in and went skiing in Vail. And so the next day I saw pictures of the lift lines. I had ridden the lift 10, 15 times by myself that day before. The line the next day was over 2.5 hours. It stretched up the mountain. And I saved that picture. I have a video from it and I saved that picture. And I literally, the name of that picture in my computer is Why, because I want to be able to ski during the week. I want to be able to ski when, is right for my schedule, and not just because it's my employer giving me the time off or happen to be able to call on a sick day. So it was a good reminder.
No, I love that. When I lived in Colorado, just about every Saturday was spent at Keystone with some nachos at the Kickapoo Lounge for lunch, and then back up on the mountain.
Yeah, that's a cool chill mountain. That's for sure.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite travel destination?
Favorite travel destination? Well, I went on my honeymoon last year to Switzerland. So I really like Switzerland. My favorite place I've been is Norway. They're kind of similar, but I love the mountains. I love Norway is great because there was fjords. It's beautiful. It's relaxed. It's quiet. People there are really nice. And everyone speaks English. It's really easy to get around.
Well, congratulations on the marriage, the honeymoon.
Thanks.
I was going to ask, have you been on any ski trips? So did you take the skis to Switzerland?
I didn't. It was in September, and I really, really wanted to because they have one mountain that's open. They have a glacier, but my wife was not. She didn't want to have to lug skis around the whole trip, and neither did I. So
maybe rent some. Okay. So as we wrap up here, do you have any requests for our audience, and how can people reach out to you? And then I want to add, how can people find your UBIT calculator?
Yeah. So if you head to my website, it's wall2main.com. Wall Street to Main Street is essentially the concept. And so I have plenty of education there. If you're interested in learning about self-directed IRAs, I have a series of 6 videos. If you have half an hour across those 6 videos, they're 29 minutes and like 28 seconds. You'll learn everything there is to know about self-directed IRAs. I also offer a free PDF on the top 10 tips and tricks on investing in multifamily with your self-directed retirement account. And so in there, I can actually, there's a couple tips on how you can avoid UBIT, how you can move a current IRA into a situation that allows you to avoid UBIT. But speaking of UBIT, I have an intro video in my header on how you can run you through the UBIT calculator and how you can get a hold of it as well.
Awesome, Josh. I really appreciate your time and you coming on the show today to kind of educate people on self-directed IRAs. And it sounds like the very vast, opportunities, things you can do with it. I think people will get a lot of value out of that.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks much, Josh. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Josh, we'll see you.
Cool. See you guys. Thanks for having me.
Wow, that was a great show. Great interview with Josh Plave from Wall to Main. Josh shared with us a bunch of details. I mean, for one, not only why he invests in multifamily real estate, and he's got a young guy, obviously got a lot of potential and talent, and has done quite well for himself, having amassed 700 units or control of 700 units within a relatively short period of time. Josh has been investing inside of 2 years and has already amassed that large of a portfolio, and has done so at not only at an early age, but jumped directly into multifamily real estate commercial, on the commercial side, having bypassed residential as a whole. So he shared with us some more granular aspects of investing with self-directed IRAs, UBIT tax, UDFI, kind of what those entail, unrelated debt finance income, unrelated business income tax, and these are things that are specifically you would have to be concerned about investing with a self-directed IRA or retirement funds. Also shares with us, hey, maybe who this could, may not be a good fit for if you're looking for specific types of investments. He shares with us some details about what are maybe some things that you can't invest in with your retirement accounts. And, great book recommendation on his end, Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl. If you haven't read that, it's a great, great book, especially if you're thinking about getting involved in multifamily real estate. And I loved his superpower. Josh shared with us his superpower is doing paperwork. How many people can say they love paperwork? You need somebody like that on your team. So make sure that you're looking out for that whenever you're putting together your team.
If you guys are interested in connecting with us, please go to tricityequity.com to learn more. And if you want to connect with other like-minded investors, you can join our Facebook group, the Honolulu Multifamily and More. If you found value in today's podcast, please give us a rating and review on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. We're on there. And we'll see you next time, guys.